Hey everyone, it's Seth Worley. So last year I directed a short here at Red Giant called Go Bag, about a spy who has to fight off a bunch of bad guys using the contents of a stranger's carry-on bag. There's this moment in the film where we have the big reveal that the bag she has is not her own, when she reaches into it to grab a gun, but instead finds a bright and colorful graphic novel called Leaky Timbers. Leaky Timbers is the creation of designer and illustrator Joey Ellis. It's brilliant, hilarious, and original, and details the exploits of the monsters that, as Joey likes to put it, can't afford to live on Sesame Street. Now, I've been a huge fan of Joey's work over the years, and I reached out to Joey and asked if I could use Leaky Timbers to beat up a random dude in a stairwell, to which he very kindly said yes, and we were instant friends. Best friends. Through this process, we started having conversations about his larger vision for Leaky Timbers, a Disney and empire of puppets and awards, and a few months later, he invited me out to Charlotte to direct a pitch video for a Leaky Timbers TV show. The shoot was an absolute blast, and since we've just released the video to the internet, I thought I'd show you some of the magic and hard work that went into making it. Now, this wasn't actually a Red Giant project, but I used Red Giant products throughout every stage of the process. So sit back and enjoy how talented we are in this behind-the-scenes look at the Leaky Timbers show pitch video. Joey's idea was to make this pitch video look like Wolfie shot the majority of it himself, so we anchored a lot of our aesthetic choices around that idea. The camera would always be at Wolfie's eye level, any on-screen graphic would need to feel like Wolfie made it with some kind of outdated technology, and the whole thing needed to feel somewhat scotch-taped together, but in a way that was clearly evident to the viewer as a stylistic choice and not an accident. The characters would all be puppets, but Joey wanted to explore having all the environments be illustrated. We referenced World of Gumball a lot, which has a naturalistic look that we love. I referenced a lot of Roger Rabbit, and I realized a lot of what worked in Roger Rabbit overall came down to a few key elements. The first being confidence in blocking and composition, meaning the camera didn't cater to the situation, it did exactly what it would do in a normal live-action scene. There's also lighting and shading. All the animated elements have shadows and light wrap where needed, almost to an exaggerated degree, making them feel like they exist in the same space as the live-action elements. And then constantly mixing mediums. The animated characters in Roger Rabbit frequently walk around carrying live-action props, like weapons and wearing live-action clothes, driving live-action cars. This is one of my favorite things about Roger Rabbit. It's a perfect example of how creating interesting problems for yourself leads to interesting solutions, resulting in a more interesting final product. Mixing mediums was actually already a major part of Joey's plan, as he had already begun work on a full-scale aluminum car set piece for the driving scenes, as well as a small-scale representation of the street out of paper cutouts. I suggested taking it one step further by adding some live-action atmosphere and set dressing in post, stuff like smoke from vents, sparks from power lines, flickering glow on lights, etc. I made a concept test from some video he shot on his phone, and we both agreed that it looked pretty rad. From the start, Joey knew exactly who he wanted to play the other two characters. Luke Flowers would play Roy, the laid-back older brother, and Andy Miller would play Jackson, the uptight middle brother. Luke and Andy are longtime friends of Joey's, but they're also both brilliant and established illustrators with their own insanely impressive bodies of work. Joey flew all of us in a day early, so I'd have time to set up, and the guys would have a full day to get a crash course in puppeteering. To get the guys comfortable with their characters, Joey ran a lot of exercises with them, in character as Wolfie.
Hey, let's play Law and Order. Go. You are the criminal, and you are the judge, and I am the bonbon. Go. Bonbon.
Hey, somebody left a dead body in the trunk.
It was me.
No, you can't. Do you know how long this show would be if you're like, yes, I'm the murderer. Bonbon.
I'm the murderer.
We shot everything on a Sony FS7, using Red Giant offload to dump and back up the cards in between scenes. I kept the camera rolling constantly because I knew we'd be creating a lot of quick random shots for the montage sequence. All of these were pulled from candid little moments in between takes. We shot the whole video in one room against one green screen, never moving it, only the lights and set pieces. There's even a scene where we wanted Jackson to walk across a room and stop in front of a projector, but making a puppet walk when the puppeteer performing him is laying stationary on the floor is difficult, so we ended up putting the projector on the camera slider and moving it into place while the character bobbed up and down pretending to walk. For scenes where the camera did move, I put tracking markers on the green screen so After Effects' camera tracker would have something to grab onto.
While retaining class and dignity.
Using science.
So for the illustrated environments, my process varied shot to shot, but this is what it generally looked like. Joey would send me a layered Photoshop file of the background, which I'd bring into After Effects and start moving things around in 3D space, just to simulate some dimension and try to keep it from looking like we just slapped a flat art file behind the characters. Then using solid overlays and masks, I create some shading and lighting effects, taking cues from the art to determine where the natural light in the shot would be coming from. Then, whenever possible, I'd use Trapcode Shine to simulate light rays coming from those light sources. All the keys were pulled with Red Giant's Primat keyer. Then whenever I had any stubborn tracking markers that refused to go away in the key, I'd erase them manually with the help of my iPad Pro running AstroPad. I also had to use RotoBrush on some shots to make up for all my mistakes, like this one where I needed Wolfie closer to the camera than he was on the day. AstroPad was really useful here too, as it did the unthinkable and made using RotoBrush not miserable. One of the things we spent a lot of time perfecting in post was the homemade VHS aesthetic of the look. The VHS plugin in Red Giant Universe was indispensable, but it was tricky finding the right balance for how much to use it and when. The first couple iterations had it over the entire video, but it became apparent very quickly that the gorgeous visual design of Joey's world was being ruined by this effect that we loved. It just looked too authentic, like we were literally draining it of production value, so we ended up using it for transitional moments, which worked perfectly for our purposes. Finally, I used Magic Bullet Re-Noiser to glue everything together with some grain and texture, and then graded every shot with Magic Bullet Colorista 4 and Mojo 2. Now lastly, I'd like to point out something really cool about this project, and it goes back to this Leaky Timbers moment in Go Bag. This moment was actually a calculated exercise on my part. See, I have this secret stalkery list. It's a running list of people whose work inspires me. I started a few years ago, and on every project I do, I look for opportunities to create a need that someone on the list is qualified to fill, giving me a valid excuse to reach out and connect with them and trick them into being my friend. Sometimes it's awkward, sometimes they don't respond, but sometimes they do respond. It's what led to Patton Oswalt narrating Old New.
He bought a really old house with really old doors, really old paint, and really old floors.
What's crazy about Leaky Timbers is that in getting to collaborate with one person on my list, I inadvertently got to work with two other people on my list. I even talked about this briefly on an episode of Andy's amazing Creative Pep Talk podcast, which we actually recorded in the car on the way to the airport at the end of the shoot. Inspiration can be found, and should be found in all other kinds of mediums.
It's always
and
more
stuff.
pure if you can take inspiration from a different field. The other thing that it does that's really interesting is, in terms of niche and differentiating yourself in the market, if you're friends with and collaborating with industries that other directors aren't, that's going to do it. You're going to stand out for a different reason.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My point of all this is this. If you don't have a list like this already, you should totally make one. Think up legitimate excuses to invite your heroes and influences to contribute to something you're working on. I mean, worst case scenario, they say no. Best case scenario, you spend a week in their house surrounded by puppets and body odor. And really, that's the dream.
Cut, Seth. Does a rap? Where does the money print out?